us here tonight, or afternoon, or whatever it is for you, where you are. My name is George Bruseker, and I'm here in my capacity as one of the vice chairs of the CIDOC CRM-SIG. And the function of this session is really to introduce this group, tell you a little bit about how we work, and then hopefully I won't take up too much of the time. And basically, there will be a presentation, but the idea is afterwards to be able to have a conversation. And if there are questions about how the group works or how to participate, or that you want to present on your thoughts about using the standard or problems with the standard or whatever, we can get into that in an organic way post my presentation. This presentation, the content, the focus is on the CRM-SIG itself. So I want to walk you through what it is, what our work is, how we go about it, what we imagine it's good for, point to some users of the standard, and then point to how you might put some links on how you could learn more and how you could engage. So stepping immediately towards the definition of the group itself. So the CIDOC CRM-SIG is one of the older working groups of CIDOC, and it has a very active tradition for now over 20 years, and it's very active in maintaining and developing its work. So we meet usually in person, now by Zoom, 3 or 4 times a year. Those meetings exist in order to maintain and develop the CRM, which I'll flesh out a little bit more in a second, the conceptual reference model that is our responsibility. And the work is done by members of the CIDOC CRM who are the actual members of CIDOC CRM-SIG are institutions, but they're represented by individuals, and those individuals bring various expertise from mathematics and physics, cultural heritage, obviously, philosophy, history, really different perspectives related to documentation in order to carry out the work. We have this institutional membership in order to try to create continuity and make sure that the CIDOC CRM isn't subject to, because it's trying to be a basic lingua franca for building data integrations and re-expressing information. Obviously, it has to be stable over time. So the institutional membership is there to try to make a solid basis and a solid history of contribution to the standard. And we use, letting somebody in. We communicate via an email list, which I'll give you later on, and our website to work through issues on the standard. We take decisions in a democratic way after making presentations of issues that exist, having discussions on how to solve them, and then voting on proposed solutions. So I've already pointed towards what we do, but let me delve into that a little bit deeper. So of course, CIDOC in general is a committee of ICOM, which is deeply interested in the creation of standards and supporting documentalists in terms of creating data which is good and reusable and well-structured, etc. This slide is meant to point towards a certain problem of creating standards, which is that great things about standards is there are very many. So you have a plethora of things to choose from. You choose a standard, you try to implement it, you transform your data to a standard. You end up having to change the standard as things move along. And so then you have to change your standard, change the data, and you get sucked up into a loop of always trying to keep up with the latest standard. and creating these pools of incompatibility. So working on a formal ontology as a standard is still stuck in this sort of loop, but it's trying to make the loop less vicious. And so really try to create a meta standard that isn't imposing how you should document, but is working on the basis of the best available knowledge of what is documented now, and trying to create a higher level abstract expression that can re-express the data you have in your information structures as a cultural heritage institution or as a researcher, and which won't change very often over time. It will change. We work on the standard continuously, but very slowly. So what we do is create this formal ontology, which we could call the CIDOC CRM, or the CIDOC Conceptual Reference Model. And that formal ontology is somebody in the door, a core ontology for describing the underlying semantics and database schemas from cultural heritage organizations. And by applying it, you can create large connected graph models of information that allows you to represent information about cultural heritage objects and what has happened in the past on a human scale. And so our main business is creating this ontology, which is in its 7th version, has 81 classes and 161 relations, and it has a series of extensions, which I'll tell you about in a second. Not to tread over the work that Stephen did last night, but Stephen gave the introduction, who's also a member of the SIG and is present now, gave an introduction on how to really use the CIDOC CRM and how to understand it, how to understand ontologies. And one of the points he made yesterday is, and it's a crucial point in thinking about CIDOC CRM, is that when people hear that there's a standard that has 81 classes and 161 relations, they think maybe it's too complex a standard to apply for them. And so it's always important to point out that the CIDOC CRM has a sort of a methodology for modeling and approach to the integration of cultural heritage information, which has to do with the fact that the information that we're interested in with regards to cultural heritage objects always can be linked back through some sort of event. So we're never directly interested, I mean, we can sometimes be directly interested in an object itself, but we're usually interested in an object for the information points it gives us regarding historical events, ideas, actors, the evolution of cultural events, places, and that sort of thing. So we have this basic representation of the modeling pattern in CIDOC CRM, which is that everything goes through a temporal entity. So if you have time, you never talk directly about a physical object having time, because that's semantically nonsense. You want to, if you want to query your data for what it means, then you want to query it for when this thing was made, when it was altered by a conservator, when an idea was first formed, when it was printed onto a particular object, where that occurred, who did it. Although there's a lot of classes in CIDOC CRM, classes and relations in CIDOC CRM, they all follow this basic pattern of physical objects and concepts and people meeting in time and at particular places in order to create a provenance history of ideas and things and people through time. And of everything in the model, you can add multiple appellations, which are basically names, and multiple types, which turn out to be a huge amount of the things that are documented in documentation systems. So as I mentioned in the introduction to the working groups yesterday, basically the output of this group are three different kinds of objects. We make semantic data specifications, first of all. So that is basically, sorry, letting somebody into the room. When you talk with, if you talk about ontologies with computer scientists, they probably immediately think of some sort of data representation, so RDF or OWL or some sort of means of working with the data. And of course you need that. But when we build the ontology, whether it's CIDOC CRM base or any of the family models, the first thing what we do is build a specification document, which is to say that we declare the ontology basically in a Word or in a PDF document with a whole bunch of formal rules for giving things names and scope notes and how they relate to each other. But the principle behind that is that we want to build a foundation for long-term data integration and reliability. So technologies are going to continue to change. CIDOC CRM was started before RDF was a standard, and probably at some point it'll go away. So the base document we produce is the semantic data specification. And then along with that, because we don't want to be a theoretical group, but to give tools to people to actually integrate data and build information, we create some semantic data serializations. In particular, we create the standard representation in RDF and OWL of the models that we build. And the third thing to say is that then all of this can be quite complicated to apply, especially when you first arrive at it. So we try to build guidelines and recommendations on how to learn and implement the standards that we've produced. And so one last point about how or what we produce as the CRM-SIG in these 3 or 4 meetings that we have a year and via our email discussion throughout the year. So we started out, and the scope of the CIDOC CRM model was to cover information structures coming from museums to start with, and to really take in data models from things like TMS and EMU and collection systems, and I don't know what, and to provide an abstraction over that to say, outside of your system of record, you can integrate your data using a semantic data structure, which will allow you to see everything together. That created a high-level semantic model. It's somewhere on the edge of a top-level ontology, and so it has a high level of expressivity, which I explained above has a certain modeling philosophy or principle. But then after that, there's a bunch of work you might like to do in terms of expressing much more detailed data, whether it be library documentation, whether it be laboratory information and conservation, whether it be digitization work, that sort of thing. And so the CIDOC CRM-SIG also works on what we call the family models. And the family models are extensions of the CIDOC CRM that follow the same basic top-level modeling, but provide much more specific classes and relationships to talk about the kind of work that happens in different domains. And so to point at those very quickly, there's a model called FRBR00. I'm just checking out chat. So the model is FRBR00 is a joint work with IFLA, and it's a semantic representation of library data. There's CRM-INF, which is used for documenting argumentation over data. CRM-Archeo, which is an extension for talking about excavation processes. CRM-Science, which is used for talking about lab processes. Oh, nobody can see my slides? I should stop for a second, because if nobody can see my slides, it'll be terrible.
We can see them, but you're not in full screen mode, so they're quite small.
Okay, I see. Well, I'll switch to full screen mode, and then people who want to come in will not be able to. It's an imperfect world.
Well, when you switch to full screen mode, if you go up to the top of the screen, you'll get a little thing that flashes down saying you are in full screen mode, and there's a button to say participants, and then it will put a thing over the top of your screen which will list those, and you can and it will flash up when people come in.
Okay, perfect. So CRM-SIG is about laboratory processes. CRM-Geo is an extension to try to match with standards in geoinformatic work. So talking about GIS and this sort of thing. CRM-BID is for modeling provenance metadata in digitization processes. CRM-BA is an extension for looking at building archaeology and the structure of buildings. And there are two very cutting-edge models that we're working on. One on CRM-Text for looking at ancient texts, and CRM-SOC, which is for modeling social phenomena. So how do we go about doing that? Well, this is the aimed for structure of work. So we want to create a conceptual model that allows you to link together data that comes from heterogeneous data formats, but will allow you to have a high level of information recall. So although you have information very specifically modeled to talk about digitization or a particular spatial location created in a geoinformatics process, you have high level classes and relations that allow you to search across this very detailed information. And we try to make our decisions in a very, with this monotonic moniker here is to say that we try to make decisions that we don't have to go back on, so that you don't have to rewrite your data with any new version of CIDOC CRM. And this diagram attempts to explain how we actually go about the work. So the CIDOC CRM, the CIDOC CRM-SIG looks at presentation models in databases, database structures themselves, and takes it that these databases express the efforts of scientists and documentalists to make statements about the world in an abstract data structure. So we try to understand the set of statements that people want to be able to make about the world and create an abstraction of that that will allow you to re-express, regardless of the database system you are talking about, that this field is about a person who has done an excavation. This field is about the date that models the creation of an object, this sort of thing. And so we go about it basically by getting in empirical data from institutions that are part of CIDOC, institutions that join the CRM-SIG and bring data to us. We look at the data structures, try to understand the semantic content. Then we talk with the specialists who are creating this data to try to understand how they're trying to use it and what they want to get out of it, and test our representations, our proposed classes and relations, and see if they really express the semantic content that they have in their data structures. And then also, ideally, identify research questions that people want to answer with semantic data in order to see if the data structures that we create are able to return answers to queries that represent real research questions. I'll skip over that for now. So what is what we do good for, or what do we hope that what we do is good for? Well, basically, the idea is that, or how I like to explain it anyhow, is that you often meet people working in their area of research or even in their department within an institution who are creating highly rich data that is talking about an area of an investigation. which is highly valuable, but falling into their own data system and describing and basically available only to them. But it's of interest to people across the world in principle, but hidden within these particular data structures. Usually it's not joined up to any particular publication, and so we have an unsatisfactory data management situation where people are investing years of their professional lives, and institutions as well, in producing high quality data that actually grounds our published knowledge, but which is hidden away in silos, which is not connected up to other professionals in one's field, which is not available to the public to empirically test or challenge published knowledge. And we would like to eventually support a dream where this data moves into linked open data using well-identified formal ontological structures in order to be able to really connect everything up and have a true information society. And so how that's envisioned to happen is that you continue to have systems of record. This is a classic slide. I hope you can see my pointer. So you continue to have systems of record in different museums or different departments using their own data structures. But these data structures are described by the ontology that we produce in order to re-represent information out of these local structures into a well-known ontology. In order to specialize that ontology to really connect data points, you can extend it with thesauri. And once you've done that, you can transform data out of your local format into some sort of linked data format, like the linked art profile we've been talking about in other sessions. And this will allow you to get a global picture across multiple data systems of record, whether it be at an institutional level, in a research project, or across institutions in research infrastructures and that sort of thing. Thinking about, why museums and researchers might be interested in taking up the CIDOC CRM and creating linked open data with an ontology that admittedly requires investing some time, either personally or institutionally, to understand how to use. I think that there's a lot of arguments to be made, and they are definitely medium to long-term arguments, but they play into, they play into the sort of theme of this conference of digital transformation and that sort of thing. Is if you really long-term think that we're building our knowledge in this digital environment, and this is where our primary knowledge will exist, then doing semantics and doing something like CIDOC CRM is about gaining control on what you're saying. So it's not leaving it to technologists to structure your data. It's giving you the chance to specify what you're saying and how you're saying it. By representing data semantically, you have a chance as a museum, as an institution, as a research project, to eat your data and get an overview of everything you know. The more that people use and create semantic data and create endpoints where we can access each other's data in linked open data using formats like linked art, the more that we can speed up our data processes and connect them and learn from each other. A point I also made earlier about why we produce CIDOC CRM in a document before we produce it in a serialization is also that a reason to make semantic data is to try to future-proof your knowledge. So systems come and systems go, but a well-defined high-level ontology expressing your data can allow you to always have a way to archive your data into a format which is going to be self-describing, and that's pretty important. And then finally, going back to these questions I raised earlier about researchers being stuck in their own worlds and not getting their data out to other people, using semantics like CIDOC CRM and making it available as linked open data allows you to start to establish a ground truth in the research community and in the broader public. So those are all motivations for doing what we do. And so some last thoughts on how to work with CIDOC CRM, so and why you would use it and how you can use it. So there's a lot of things you can use it for. If you are working within the documentation community, but you're working on something that I haven't described in my spiel up till now, you might want to take CIDOC CRM and use it as a basic that you want to base your ontological modeling on in order to represent your field of work, because you want to ultimately integrate with other cultural heritage data expressed in CIDOC CRM. So on the one hand, you might just want to be doing work like CRM-SIG and creating ontologies. And if you were doing so, then you might want to make it an official extension of CIDOC CRM. But more likely, you're an institution or you're a researcher and you want to create data, or you want to be able to re-express your data in a common format in order to link it with other people's data and to make sure that it has a certain longevity and is reusable. So in that case, you can either use CIDOC CRM for mapping your data to a semantic standard and then having it available in that format. Or another trend that's going on is to take tools that allow you to automate or to build your data ab initio in a semantic format. Tools like Arches, which allow you to immediately encode your data in a semantic oriented format and be compatible from the start. So I'll skip over that. Let's not take up too much time and allow us to have a conversation. Who uses CIDOC CRM? I wanted to, I put together a bundle of icons here. And a lot of people use CIDOC CRM for a lot of different reasons. I just wanted to point out sort of 4 categories of kind of use. One category of use is groups that have a specific research project where you're trying to bring together a number of institutions towards connecting information that is stored in your different databases because of your institutional needs, but which together might form an interesting data structure. So coalitions like FADOS, which is an international consortium of photo archives, or this coalition in France, MAZA, which deals with archaeological data, work together to create common data models using semantics. Of course, we could point to the linked art, but we've already said that, in order to have a re-expression that will allow them to query their data together. Also, there's an institutional level application of CIDOC CRM. So the Getty is an institution to point to as an example of this right now. So the Getty is implementing linked art as an application profile of CIDOC CRM. And the goal is to be able to really produce data which is not only going to be linked across departments over time, but which allows the Getty to share out its significant research resources towards the general public in a way that will be easily consumable and which can be built upon with other partners. And then a final thing to point out is sort of national level applications, and we could point to CHIN here, the Canadian Heritage Information Network, which is a standards body at the national level, which uses it to try to create standards by which the museum community at the Canadian level would be able to integrate certain kinds of information. At this point, artists, and later on artworks, et cetera, et cetera. And so to wind up my presentation for the moment, so if you're interested in this kind of work, then the places to go to get, the official places to go to get information are the CIDOC-CRM.org website. As I said, we work through a mailing list. So if you want to join the conversation of the CRM-SIG, this is the mailing list address. And to get added to that mailing list, please send an email to the chair and CC myself, and you would get added to that. As I said before, we meet 3 to 4 times a year, usually in person, but now virtually, and that kind of makes things easier. So if you really want to get involved either with expanding, maintaining, developing CIDOC CRM, or if you just want to understand more, etc., or present a project that you're doing with CIDOC CRM, then you can see the list of our meetings here on our website. And you're very welcome to contact us and join those meetings. And for the foreseeable future, those will be online. And the positive thing of that is that that makes it easier for being able to join and communicate with us. And then if you're interested in CIDOC CRM, starts with just trying to understand what it is and how to use it. I have an initiative with a colleague, Anis Guillem, which has a game which you can download and play to try to understand how to use the ontology. And then, and I think this is an important point to end on and open up the conversation finally. And we just had a crossover conversation with the Linked Art working group just before this session. And there I mentioned on the panel that the CRM-SIG focuses heavily on building the tools for people to integrate data. So we're a meta level above the research questions. So we're not doing research on provenance. We're not doing research on even, cultural heritage objects. We're doing research on the data structures that represent those things, so that some people can find that dry. The step, but it's a tool that we want to put in people's hands to actually do their research where they're interested in the content. And so CIDOC CRM doesn't end with the CRM-SIG, but it goes out into these groups that are doing something with CRM and creating data and sharing it and expressing it. This is definitely just an impromptu list of 3 groups that I know that are obviously major initiatives in the community. There are many others, but finding the group that's working on the kind of data that you're interested in and using CRM is a great way to start a conversation and start using semantics to make your research more sustainable in the long run and maybe answer more questions in the short term. So thanks for dealing with my presentation, and I'd like to open up the floor for people to comment or ask questions or whatever.